The story of our existence is often told through the lens of our own blue planet. Yet the true prologue of humanity's survival was written in the fires of a celestial collision that birthed our silent silver shadow. Long before the first spark of consciousness flickered in an organic mind, the Earth existed in a state of precarious chaos, a molten sphere vulnerable to the violent whims of a crowded solar system. This was the era of the Big Whack, a visceral moment 4.5 billion years ago when a rogue planet named Theia, a world the size of Mars, screamed through the void and slammed into the early Earth with a force that defies human comprehension. This wasn't a mere impact. It was a cosmic transmutation. The collision was so energetic that it vaporized vast quantities of both worlds, spraying a glowing halo of superheated debris into the dark. Within this ring of fire, gravity began its slow, rhythmic work, knitting together the shattered fragments of our own planet's heart to form the moon. I find it profoundly moving to realize that when we look up at the moon, we are looking at a displaced piece of our own home, a literal part of the Earth's soul that was sacrificed so that the rest of us could eventually breathe. As this glowing sphere of liquid magma drifted into the darkness, it began a cooling process that lasted millions of years, finally forming a solid crust about 4.43 billion years ago. This transition from a chaotic, boiling ocean of rock to a solid world was a turning point for life itself. The moon's birth served as a stabilizing force, a heavy gravitational anchor that corrected the Earth's erratic wobble. By locking us into a steady tilt, the moon gave us the predictable cycle of seasons and the rhythmic heartbeat of the tides, creating the very cradle of stability required for biological evolution to take root. Without this silent guardian, Earth would have been a world of extreme, unpredictable climates, a place where life might have struggled to ever find a foothold. It is a debt we rarely acknowledge, that our biological rhythm is synchronized with the cooling of a rock that was born from our own destruction. Yet, for centuries, we have looked at this guardian through a lens of profound misunderstanding, convinced that its internal fires had long since been extinguished. We assigned the moon a role of geological death, a static relic that supposedly stopped its internal engine nearly 3 billion years ago. We spoke of it as a dead world, a museum piece frozen in time, stripped of the vitality that defines a living planet. But as we look closer, that narrative of cold finality begins to crack. The deceptive silence we've observed for generations was never a sign of death, but rather a mask for a much deeper, slower metabolism that we are only now beginning to perceive. The moon is not a hollow shell or a stagnant ghost. It is a world that has carried the heat of its violent birth across billions of years, defying our expectations of what it means to be active. To understand the moon today is to realize that we have been living next to a restless spirit, a companion that is not just a witness to our history, but a participant in a geological saga that is far from over. This realization forces us to confront our own arrogance, to recognize that even a world born from fire and left in the cold can still hold a pulse, waiting for us to finally listen to the tremors of its ancient, shrinking heart. While we once viewed this silent sentinel as a relic of a bygone era, we are beginning to realize that the moon's stony mask hides a heart that is still rhythmically pulsing with a restless energy. The revelation came not from a single explosion, but from a meticulous gaze directed at the moon's far side, where researchers from the University of Maryland identified 266 mysterious mountain ridges that simply shouldn't be there if the moon were truly dead. These aren't the grand, ancient peaks we've mapped for centuries. They are sharp, jagged protrusions, thrusting out from the lunar crust like fresh scars on an old body. In the vast, intimidating timeline of the cosmos, these ridges are infants, some appearing to be as young as 160 to 200 million years. To put that in perspective, while the first dinosaurs were beginning their long reign on Earth, the moon was still actively reshaping its own face, proving that its geological story was not a closed book, but a manuscript with pages still being written. There is something haunting about the way these ridges appear in clusters, typically grouped in sets of 10 to 40, as if the moon is experiencing a series of localized structural sighs. They tend to emerge in regions where the lunar surface is at its weakest, finding the fractures in the ancient crust to vent a lingering internal pressure. This geological youth challenges the very foundation of our planetary science. If the moon's engines supposedly stalled 3 billion years ago, what could possibly be fueling this modern defiance? The answer lies in the realization that the moon hasn't been nearly as quiet as we believed. Rather, it has been vibrating on a frequency we only recently learned to tune into. We are discovering that the geological death we assigned to it was perhaps just a long, deep sleep, and the moon is now twitching in its slumber. But the most visceral proof of this pulsing heart didn't come from satellite imagery alone, but from the forgotten whispers of the Apollo era. Decades ago, astronauts left seismometers on the lunar surface, small, sensitive ears pressed against the dusty ground. And what they heard was the sound of a world that refused to stay still. These instruments recorded 28 shallow moonquakes, some reaching a magnitude of 5 on the Richter scale. On Earth, we are used to quakes being dampened by our thick atmosphere and deep oceans. But on the moon, a tremor of that magnitude makes the entire sphere ring like a massive hollow bell for 10 minutes or more. These aren't the deep, rhythmic groans caused by Earth's tidal pull on the lunar core. These are shallow, jagged quakes occurring near the surface, likely the very birth pains of the mountain ridges we are now seeing. I often think about those quakes, the sheer, terrifying silence of a world shaking violently without the sound of wind or the crashing of waves. It suggests that beneath the serene silver light we see from our bedroom windows, there is a frantic, structural struggle taking place. The moon is not a finished sculpture. It is a work in progress, a world that is still heaving, cracking, and striving to find its final form. This internal pulse transforms our neighbor from a distant object of study into a dynamic, unpredictable companion. It forces us to acknowledge that we are not just looking at a rock, but at a living history that is still unfolding. A heart that, despite the freezing vacuum of space, still has enough warmth to beat against the dark. This lingering warmth, though faint compared to the fires of its youth, is the primary driver of a transformation that feels almost heartbreakingly fragile. The moon is literally shriveling as it cools. Imagine a grape slowly losing its moisture, its skin becoming too large for its diminishing core until it begins to wrinkle, fold, and crack to fit its new, smaller self. This is the incredible shrinking moon. Because the lunar interior is still radiating its remaining heat into the freezing void of space, the entire volume of the satellite is contracting, causing it to slim down by about 150 feet in diameter over the last several 100 million years. While that distance might seem trivial in the vastness of the cosmos, for a rigid, stony world, it is a catastrophic physical shift that triggers a planetary identity crisis, forcing the crust to buckle under the pressure of its own retreat. We see the most dramatic evidence of this shriveling within the Luna Maria, those vast, dark, obsidian-like plains that have defined the face of the moon for eons. We used to look at these patches and see nothing but the frozen, silent graves of ancient lava seas, supposedly lulled into an eternal sleep billions of years ago. But as the moon's core shrinks, the rigid crust of these maria is being squeezed and compressed beyond its breaking point. This creates what scientists call wrinkle ridges and lobate scarps, towering, stair-step cliffs that thrust upward when one section of the surface is forced to slide over another. It is a violent tectonic adjustment, a world struggling to fit into a suit of armor that has become too big. To me, there is something deeply poignant about this. The moon isn't just aging, it is retracting, folding its history into itself as it loses the last of its ancient vitality. Yet this isn't a lonely struggle, because the moon is locked in a restless, invisible tug-of-war with the Earth. Our planet's massive gravitational pull acts like a constant, heavy hand, kneading the moon's interior and creating tidal stresses that keep the lunar crust in a state of perpetual tension. This gravitational flexing generates internal friction, a small but significant source of heat that further complicates the moon's cooling process. It is a dynamic and high-stakes interaction. When the internal pressure of the shrinking core meets the external pull of Earth's gravity, the crust finally snaps. These moments of release are the shallow moonquakes we've detected. the physical groans of a satellite that is literally being squeezed from both the inside and the outside. This global contraction forces us to reconsider our human perception of permanence. We look at the moon and see a symbol of the unchanging, a faithful witness that has remained constant throughout the rise and fall of human empires. But science reveals a far more vulnerable reality. The moon is a world in retreat, a shrinking giant that is physically withdrawing from its own surface. It is a physical entity still grappling with the unforgiving laws of thermodynamics, a body that is twisting and cracking as it settles into a cold, final sleep. As we plan to build our own fragile structures in the shadow of these tectonic scarps, we must respect the fact that the ground is not a static platform. It is a shifting, groaning landscape of pressure and release, a world that is literally folding in on itself, reminding us that even the stars and the moons are subject to the slow, inevitable touch of time. In the absence of air to slow it down, these tiny glass arrows can travel for miles, threatening to shred the delicate instruments of neighboring outposts or scour the hulls of other spacecraft. It reveals a daunting paradox. The more we try to inhabit the moon, the more we weaponize its surface against ourselves. We are beginning to understand that the moon is not a welcoming stage for human ambition. It is a jagged, shivering, and electrostatic fortress. To survive there, we must respect the fact that we are intruders in a world that uses its own skin to repel the touch of the living. Perhaps the moon was never meant to be just a nightlight or a symbol of the unchanging. Perhaps it is a mirror, reflecting our own drive to survive and adapt in an unforgiving universe. As we stand on the threshold of this new lunar era, we must acknowledge that the moon is more than a destination. It is a living, shivering testament to the mysteries of time. We are ready to go back, but this time we go with our eyes open, listening to the tremors and respecting the silence of a world that is finally waking up to meet us. The saga of our moon is a powerful reminder that silence is rarely synonymous with stillness. For eons, we gazed at that silver orb and saw a finished monument, a cold, dead relic of a violent past. Yet, as we peel back the layers of our own misunderstanding, we discover a world that is still breathing, still shrinking, and still fiercely protecting its secrets. The revelation of active moonquakes, shifting tectonic ridges, and the treacherous, clinging nature of its dust transforms the moon from a static backdrop into a dynamic character in our cosmic story. It is a world in a state of perpetual transition, caught between the thermal echoes of its fiery birth and the freezing promise of its shadowed craters. As we stand on the brink of a new era of lunar exploration, we realize that the moon is not just a destination to be conquered, but a restless companion to be respected. Our journey back to its surface is more than a feat of engineering. It is a profound lesson in humility, proving that even our closest neighbor remains an enigma, waiting for us to finally listen to its subtle, shivering heart. The most striking lesson from the moon's hidden life is that vitality often persists where we least expect it. We judge the moon as dead, simply because we couldn't see its movement from a distance. Similarly, in our own lives, we often overlook the quiet strength in others, or even ourselves, because it doesn't shout or demand attention. Look beneath the surface. Just as the moon hides a pulsing heart beneath a layer of dust, people often carry immense depth, resilience, and internal heat that isn't immediately visible. Practice looking past the static exterior of those around you to find the dynamic spirit within. Respect the process of shrinking. The moon is contracting and cracking as it matures. In life, we often have to shed old versions of ourselves or shrink our egos to fit into a new, more refined reality. This process can be painful and cause tremors, but it is a natural part of evolution. Find your frozen oasis. The moon's most valuable resource is hidden in its darkest, coldest shadows. Your greatest potential or most significant breakthroughs often lie in the parts of your life you are most afraid to explore, your shadows. If you have the courage to hop into the crater, you may find the very thing that fuels your future.